gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior.
But it just means that you're not walking in obedience, you're not walking in fellowship with God. And that fellowship has been broken. See, in our natural state, we're in rebellion against God. When we come to know Christ, we have a new wanter. We want to obey. So when we want to obey, God begins to give us the assurance that He is working in our life. Because in our natural state, we're in rebellion against God. We have no desire to do what He pleases and to obey His Word. It's not within us to even want to please God. But when a man or woman begins to obey God, first by responding in faith to the gospel, and then by growing in a desire to be Christ-like, then we know that we love Jesus. We know that our life has been changed. Isn't that a neat feeling? To know that we're being conformed into the image of Christ, from being changed from glory to glory to the image of Christ. And we know that. That's a blessed assurance that somebody ought to write a hymn about. Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. We know that. Why? Because we're walking in obedience. We know that we love Jesus. We know if we obey His commands. Number 3, if we love Jesus, we must love other Christians. We must love other Christians. Last week we talked about some of the commandments of Christ, and I recommend a book by John Piper, What Jesus Demands from the World. It's full of His commandments. But Jesus kind of sums up His commandments in Mark chapter 12. He says this, they ask Him, what commandment is first and foremost of all? Jesus answered, the foremost is this, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. In John chapter 13, verse 34, Jesus says, 34, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. John 15:12, Jesus said, this is my commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you. So we could talk about many commandments that we're trying to obey, but the one issue this morning is very simply this. If you're going to love Jesus, then you've got to love other people. That's His commandment. I read a story about a Catholic priest who had a new parish, and so to get to know his people in the parish, he dressed up like a beggar. And he went to that little village as a beggar, disguised as a beggar, and just kind of walked the streets with his people to get to know who they were. And one lady that he had identified was a very prominent lady in his parish, in that church, was very prim and proper. And she came up with a big Bible, big enough to choke a mule, and started talking to the beggar about the Bible. And she said, do you know anything about the Bible? And he said, ma'am, just a little bit. She said, well, how many commandments are there? How many commandments in the Bible? He said, there are 11. She kind of got disgusted. Get away from me, beggar. You don't know anything about the Bible. You can imagine how surprised she was that Sunday when she went to church and the beggar was her priest. And the title of his sermon was The 11th Commandment. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another as I have loved you. So this morning, as we think about obeying His commandments, let's just start with the very basic. Loving God and loving other people. If we love other people, we will love them, first of all, by serving. We love by serving. Jesus demonstrated that so clearly in the upper room when He laid aside His robe. He girded Himself with the towel, and He went and He got on His knees and He washed the feet of His disciples. He says, what I've done for you, you do for other people. What I've done, you go and do likewise. He served them. Paul said in Philippians 2, we do nothing from selfish or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than ourselves. That's what serving is all about. The other person is more important than I am. And we cannot genuinely love until we come to that realization. As we've said many times, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is what? I think we're getting it. Selfishness. That's right. Selfishness. Selfishness. And so love is when we serve other people. We love by sacrifice. That means that we love not just when it's convenient. We love when even there's a great cost to us. I always think about Psalm 15 when I think about sacrificial love. Psalm 15 verse 4, he's talking about the godly man. But verse 4 of Psalm 15 says, he swears to his own hurt and does change. He swears to his own hurt and does not change. So what does that have to do with love? That verse says that whenever you say you're going to do something, and when it becomes even more costly than what I thought it was going to be, I'll still do it. He swears to his own hurt and does not change. He says, I'm going to love you till death do us part. And even if it's more costly than I ever thought it would be, he does not change. That's what love is all about. It's all about serving. It's all about sacrifice. We're committed, even if it's more costly than we could ever have imagined. We do not change our mind. You know, sometimes we're called to love this way in our marriage, with our children, or even with our parents. So we love by sacrifice. We love by sharing. By sharing. Sharing ourselves. Sharing the gospel. Sharing what God has given us. This week has been kind of a crazy week for us. My dad had surgery Monday morning. Thank you for your prayers. They removed his kidney, and Mother is 80-something years old. She just got out of the hospital last week, so my brother and sister and I decided that we would not leave him alone. So my brother stayed with him Monday night. I went up Tuesday and Wednesday, and then Thursday we got him out of the hospital. But anyway, you know, spending time with your parents is always interesting. No, that's another point. But the point I was going to make was Wednesday morning, Mother was reading her devotion. Mother was reading her devotion. She does that every morning. She said, here, read this. And usually when she tells me to read something, there's a message behind what she wants me to do. But there's a guy named Dan Clark who was telling a story in her little devotion guide. And again, we're talking about sharing and love. He said that Dan Clark said that when he was a little boy, he remembered going to the circus with his dad. And they were standing in line to buy their tickets at the circus. And in front of them was a farmer and his wife and 8 children in line to buy tickets for the circus. As they were standing in line, kind of inching their way forward, finally the farmer got to the window to buy the tickets for his wife and 8 children, and said, and when they asked what's the price, the wife's face just dropped. It's very obvious that this poor farmer, the way they were dressed, didn't have enough money to go into the circus. So as he was about to leave, Dan Clark says, I remember my dad taking out a $20 bill and dropping it on the ground. He said, hey, sir, said, you must have dropped this, and handed him a $20 bill. And the farmer just smiled at him, and he knew what his dad was doing, and he bought the tickets. And Dan Clark said he and his dad didn't have enough money to go to the circus, but you know, they went home with something a lot more valuable than having gone to the circus. And folks, that's what love is all about. It's about serving. It's about sacrifice. It's about sharing what we have with other people. It's about not being self-centered. We can love like Christ when we take our focus off of ourselves and we focus on other people. Focus on other people. If we love Jesus, we must love other Christians. We don't love, and you know, why is that so important? Because that's so hard for some of us to do, isn't it? There are probably some people right now in our life that we can think about that we say, you know, I just don't love those folks. Some people in our life, when we hear that something negative happened, we kind of smile. We kind of smile because we think in our heart they got it coming. If we love Jesus, we must love other people. If we love others, we know we love Jesus. Number 4. If we love others, then we can know. Again, John said in 1 John 3:13, we know that we have passed from death to life because we love our brothers.